do is we record our programs with FAV in order to share with a broader audience. San Clemente here is getting a special treat with our Sip and Learn tonight, but a lot of other people really want to explore this topic of media bias. If you're not comfortable with that video recording, you can just click off your video and your screen will be blank with your name on it, and that's fine too. So with that, what I'd like to do is we're going to test our breakout rooms real quick with a little icebreaker. And so I'm going to go ahead and enable the breakout rooms. And what I'd ask you to do is when you go in there, just share your name and why you came today, what attracted you to this program. And we'll go ahead and see how that works out. So let's see, I'm gonna start. Has anybody seen the breakout rooms? You can go ahead and start joining when you see them. And we'll be in there for 2 minutes and I'll let you know when that time is up. What I'd like to do is get into the subject matter, and most people don't know that the First Amendment actually has 5 different freedoms in it. And actually, polling suggests that less than 1% of Americans can name all 5. So what I'd ask you to do is if you know any of the First Amendment freedoms, feel free to type them into the chat function down below and shoot them in. And we'll see collectively as a group if we can get them. So now, is Tyler back out there somewhere? Are you going to monitor that for us, Tyler?
Yeah, I've got religion, speech, assembly, expression, religion. Someone said bear arms. Might be the second.
Second, but we're missing a couple.
Press, but I can't type.
Okay, there you go. Good job.
Great.
The media, which is the subject of today's conversation. And there's one other one out there. Usually it's associated with assembly.
Yeah.
Anybody know what it is?
Freedom of assembly. Freedom to.
Petition. Somebody got it. I see Ed Molina sent in all 5. So great. Okay, it's petition was the 5th one. Usually the reason why people are protesting is because they're attempting to petition the government for grievance. So I'll go ahead and share this slide with everybody so you can see what I'm talking about here. Let's do that and then pull that up. And what you'll see is it's pretty interesting with really 45 words. The Founding Fathers captured these 5 freedoms. And there's a lot of complexity there. There is, in today's environment, a lot of emotion there. And sometimes they can be in conflict with each other. So I'd like to do a very quick poll and just show you one other feature here. And that is, which of those freedoms do you think is the most important freedom? And so I'll share that with you in the First Amendment. And we'll see what the audience thinks. This is anonymous, so just feel free to pick the ones that you feel most compelled toward. And then once we get a good group, and we've got about half the group has already submitted answers, I'll go ahead and end the poll in another 30 seconds or so. And that'll give you some feedback on what the audience thinks here. We've still got about 7 people who have not voted. I know our gentleman who called in on the phone won't be able to vote, but all right, so that's taken about a minute. I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results with you. And that gives you a chance for at least this audience in terms of which ones they feel most called to. And then there's a couple other things I would just like to let you know before we really get, because we're going to dive into freedom of the press. But there are other ways for you to participate as well as we're going along. And so if you look down on the bottom of your screen, you can also check on reactions. And if you like something, a comment that somebody says, you can clap. And the little hand clap will come up on your screen. If you want to give them a thumbs up, you can give them a thumbs up. Those electronic icons will go away in about 10 seconds. But that's just another way to interact. And then there's also a raise hand function next to your name in the participants box. So you can go over there, and if you want to try to get Tyler's attention because you'd like to share a comment or ask a question, feel free to do that as we're going along. So we're here to talk about freedom of the press. And a lot of people have questions about this. A lot of people have questions about loss of confidence in media organizations and what do I believe anymore, and what's social media and technology have to do with that, and trolls and bots and fake news. And those accusations run in all ideological directions as well. And so we've developed this program as a way to, one, learn from our audience in terms of what people are thinking out there, but also share some trends and ideas that we've found. And one of our partners is PEN America, and they do a lot in the press freedom space, both protecting journalists and providing tools for people to engage with the media landscape. And they published what's called a Bill of Rights for consumers with respect to media information out there. So I'd offer just a couple things. You can look it up online if you want. I know Tyler might be able to pull up that PEN America News Consumers Bill of Rights and Responsibilities and share the link with you if you want more information. But they say, avoid spreading false information ourselves, right? And so one of the best ways to do that is to not immediately send that chain email that you just got out to your favorite 30 people, or retweet something that you haven't read the underlying article on, or like or share, because those titles in those articles many times are meant to pull at our emotions. They're meant to get us engaged and to capture our attention. And it might not even reflect the underlying content of the article. So avoid spreading false information. Support news outlets that abide by high journalistic standards. That's one of their recommendations. Seek a variety of sources of information, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the media bias chart. And then report instances of misinformation. So the tech platforms in particular have tools that you can use on Twitter or Facebook. If you think something is wrong, you can flag it. And then just know a lot of people get emotional with respect to journalists who are out there. And their job many times is to challenge authority. It's to hold government accountable, whether it's here at the local level or at the national level or around the world. And so their job is to bring levels of transparency onto things that many times people don't want to disclose. And so that creates for adversarial relationships that are out there. And it helps if we keep that in mind. So anyway, we'll go ahead, and I want to share something that I know is probably going to get everybody pretty fired up. If you've got a screen and you can see the content. Tyler is also going to share it with you. He's going to put it in the chat function, so you can click on it and download it if you'd like. And this is our handout for this particular session, and it's called the Media Bias Chart. And it's got one other slide on there about what we can do as citizens with engaging in the media landscape. So that's going to be coming out. And what I'll do is I'll put it up on your screen so you can actually see what I'm talking about. And what I'd ask you to do is just resist the urge to immediately go to your sources of news and try to debate whether it's placed properly on the chart. What this is this is a depiction, it's a model of the media landscape. And you'll be able to, we can also email this to you if for whatever reason you can't download it in the chat function tonight. We're happy to do that. We license this from Adfonts Media. And what they do is they spend a lot of time analyzing information sources out there. And so if you look at the top of the chart, in the middle, it says neutral up there at the very top. And then if you start moving to the left, it'll say skews left, partisan left, most extreme left. And then same to the right, skews right, hyperpartisan right, most extreme right. So you've got your ideological spread they're attempting to capture there. And then also staying at the top, what they're saying there, if you go over to the left-hand side, is those organizations up there tend to do original fact reporting. Those are like your wire services. They're just reporters out there, AP, Reuters, those types who are just shooting in facts to the media ecosystem that's out there. And then as you start working your way down that scale, you'll see, we start seeing analysis mixed in. And then we'll see opinion mixed in as you go further down the scale. And then it gets down into, incomplete selective storytelling, if you will, propaganda, misinformation type stuff. So it's an attempt to rate the reliability of those media sources. And you can see it's almost in a bell-shaped curve. So you've got, this is a relatively new phenomenon, especially for those who were raised on NBC, ABC, CBS, where the news tended to be vanilla flavored. It was very much, you chose one of those channels based on whether or not you wanted to listen to Walter Cronkite or one of the other anchors. And it was before dinner time, and then you might have caught a half-hour segment before the late night talk shows, but you pretty much knew what you were going to get. And what we've seen in the media landscape in particular, there are several trends going on. Some of it's around technology and some of it's around the customer bases. And so what's happened is the technology has really upended the media industry from the perspective of advertising dollars have gone away and have gone to the big tech platforms, Google, Facebook in particular. And the other thing is we've had several generations now who have been raised on, they don't believe they need to pay for information or their media sources because everything was free in the 90s, if you think about it, with the advent of the internet and as this information started coming out. And so the subscription bases have gone away. And so many of these organizations have shifted to digital models, but they've also started catering to the biases of their customer base more. And so what you see some of them doing is they'll put out opinion pieces without acknowledging their opinion pieces. Those who adhere to a little bit tighter journalistic standards will at least say, hey, this is an opinion, and warn their readers before putting it out. And then you as the reader can make the decision whether or not to get involved in reading that particular piece. So anyway, what I'd like you to do is we're going to head back to breakout rooms, and I will stop the screen sharing. But I'd ask you, when you go back into your breakout room, this is the question to discuss with others in your group. How could this be a tool that you could use to make sense of your sources of media, where you consume information? And would it be helpful? And then so we'll spend 5 minutes in there. So we'll give you more time in the breakout room. And when you come back, if if some folks want to share with the broader audience, we'll go ahead and do that. But at least you'll get a pretty good discussion in your breakout room. And I'll go ahead and activate those again, and we'll open them all up. For some reason,
Yeah,
there we
Steve,
go. Now I hear you.
Steve, was that 5 minutes?
Yes, sir. It goes by really fast, doesn't it?
We were just getting engaged. Anyway, really good.
Great. Well, I'd love to hear more if you want to, if you're willing to share with a group or your group.
Well, the four of us, I think, just touched on the periphery of what we're discussing. And the fact is that it appears, and I'm speaking, I guess, my interpretation of the four, we are really confused about the variety of information from sources and sometimes disillusioned and want to disengage.
Yeah.
Because even all the way up to the federal level, it seems like there's a lot of headbutting and just a lack of compromise, et cetera, et cetera. That's where I am. I'll shut up.
No, that's, I'll tell you, it's really fascinating. I've seen millennials have conversations with people in your generation, and they're coming to the same conclusion. They're just shutting the television off, you know, and they don't want to hear Fox, they don't want to hear CNN, they don't want to hear any of it, because it just seems like everybody's shouting over each other and it's contentious. And the rhetoric is, you know, really nasty as well, and it's turning people off.
That's why.
But yeah, that's important. We still got, how are we doing here? I think we've probably got everybody back, which is great. Let's just get a check. Cool. So does anybody want to share with the broader group some of the things you might have spoke about? I saw Michael Snow type something in before you went into breakout room saying news from Comedy Central ? You want to elaborate on that, Mike?
I remember there was a time when that was a major source of news for a big chunk of the population. Sadly.
Maybe it still is. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think one thing, Steve, that we talked about in our breakout is that, you know, and I know as the publisher of local community news papers and platforms, it's more difficult to be down the middle and be neutral than it is to fall in one camp or the other. If you fall in one side of the fence or the other, you're basically playing to an echo chamber that, you know, claps and supports you. But when you try to play it down the middle, like Reuters or some of the more, you know, kind of neutral news organization, even BBC, which I try to watch as much as I can to get my news. You know, it's when you're down the middle, you're, you know, at the mercy of both camps. If you're falling to one or the other, you know, get to be applauded by whichever one of those groups you might be in. But I think that's one of the challenges for a lot of news organizations these days is, you know, it's harder to be neutral.
Yeah, I think it's, I've heard journalists make the case that it's actually the economics that are driving the organizations there. It's
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's a lot more. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you fall on one side, the Koch brothers and their friends will support you. If you fall on the other side, you know, Hollywood will support you. You know, so it's a very, I think luckily for community media organizations like ours, it's because there aren't big special interest groups with big money. It's easier for us to try to play it down the middle because, you know, our responsibility is to the community at large. And at least, you know, that's the line we try to play. But I think it's harder for the national media organizations, quite frankly, and even some of the bigger regional papers like the LA Times.
Yeah.
You know, because they serve difficult communities, and they got to get their bread buttered.
Nor, I'm just, I'm curious, I can't recall, what do you think of the media bias chart as a tool? for people to look at and maybe analyze, how they are perceiving what they take in?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Bud. As a journalist and as a trained journalist and someone who spent 30 plus years in this industry and started my own media group, looking at that chart, I find I don't have a lot of issue with much of where they place some of those brands. There are a couple that I would scoot further left and scoot further right. But I do think that, it's funny, it's really funny. We were at dinner a few nights ago and I literally told friends of mine, because they asked me, like, where do you get your news, Norm? And I said, Reuters. I literally get my news from Reuters. I do not, I used to try to bounce back and forth between CNN and Fox to try to, get both sides of, say, an argument. But it's so opinionated. It's so rooted in, kind of angered political speak that it's really difficult to even watch it. I'm finding myself just not even wanting to watch it anymore.
Yeah.
But I think the chart is actually really cool. And I think, to your point, could be used as something for anybody to be able to use as kind of a balancing tool, which is pretty interesting. And I'd like to, as I said, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. In our group, we wanted to know, where was that chart? Who was that formulated by?
Sure, great question. You can,
That was our group.
Tyler, can you send just like a URL maybe for Adfonts Media? It's a nonprofit organization that they basically bring in a lot of volunteers and run them through a training regimen so that they can consume lots of media and then use it to provide ratings. Now, as you know, any model is, there are assumptions and simplifications there in terms of, just take, for example, any one of those news organizations is made up of dozens, if not hundreds, of individual human beings who all have their own biases. And so just trying to put them on one spot on the chart is problematic. And what I would applaud Adfonts Media for doing, though, is they have a completely transparent process and they respond to criticism when they get it. And so you can go to their website online and see how they've gone through numerous iterations of this chart, how it's changed over time based on feedback that they've gotten from people across the world. And so feel free to check it out if that's something you'd like to learn more about.
Yeah, Steve.
I'd like to have that emailed to me if I could, but I'll talk.
Sure. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I think when you were talking about that group who put that chart together and you gave us the URL, and then you mentioned that on their website, they're transparent and they have, I think, an explanation of who's doing this work for them. And even then, I think there's such a lack of trust nationwide in the media in general. And whether it's Media Bias Fact Check or Snopes and all these other Facebook fact checkers or whatever, there is just zero trust amongst the public in this country right now, and media in general. So you almost have to really fine tune and hone your own skills to be able to try to determine what's legit and what's not, because so much of what we are dealing with today is just an absolute illusion when it comes to what the media is putting out there in front of us today.
Yeah, no, I agree that there's, and it's not just loss of confidence in the media, right? There is loss of confidence in institutions writ large. And a lot of people are struggling with that, whether it's government, whether it's the police, higher education, whatever these institutions are, people are losing confidence in them. And I think that's one of the challenges for our generation, I guess, and maybe younger is, do we need to build new institutions, or how do we reinvigorate those institutions to inspire that confidence that we would expect?
Agreed.
I have a question, a comment. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made already, Norb and Alan, et cetera. Being the father of 3 millennial adults, I try to, as a father, I consider myself somewhat objective, I hope. And I actually do the same. I do watch news on the right, news on the left, and try to discern, okay, let's try to assess and what do you think? But then you talk to your kids or younger generation folks, and they have a much different perspective. And so I always say, well, they're entitled to their opinion, as we all are. And sometimes I actually maybe learn from them. And sometimes I'm asking the question to my own kids. I go, are you guys watching the same thing I'm watching? Because I'm coming up with a different twist on this. But instead of the neutral position, as Norb said, I'm just trying to say, I just want to be objective. I just want to understand both sides, or what is the issue? What are we arguing about? And are we trying to find a solution, or are we just arguing? And I find that, we're just talking. And again, we all know what's going on in the world and the different hotspots in our country. But truly, I'm 62 years old, and I'm seeing things, and I'm still trying to understand, how do we get here? How do we get this far into this, and being such a great advanced society? How can we not just fix this? So, I mean, I think I'm asking more questions than getting answers to what I see on TV, but I'm just glad that you put this together, so at least we're able to air out some thoughts and maybe learn something from things that we don't think about. So thank you guys for putting this together tonight.
Thanks for joining us.
One of the,
Go ahead.
sorry, no, this is Matt. Sorry, I'm
Go ahead, Matt.
mobile. I think one of the things that you brought up before, which I think was spot on, and it's a testament to the times, right, and technology, and that is, and I think you mentioned something about Walter Cronkite, and the reality is that there used to be a single source of truth, and there no longer is, right? There's interpretation of reality. I already mentioned, in a private room, it's an election year, so you're going to see sort of extremes. But if we go back in history and you take a look at, the television never would have been built without advertising. And this is going way, way back, right? And I'm not trying to date myself, but there would never have been broadcast television without advertising. And with advertising, you're consuming, you become the product. I think the challenge with us in interpreting the single source of truth now is that you've got so many media inputs that it's dizzying to try to figure out what's right and wrong, whether it's with your friends, your family, or colleagues. And many times you're afraid to share your view, which may be very centrist. It may be very right, very left, because you're afraid of retribution. And again, I go back to, I do believe a lot of these causes are genuine and they're from the heart, but I do believe that we are witnessing and experiencing extreme views because it's an election year. Now, there's a lot of people that don't want to agree with that, but I mean, that's just my personal bias. I just think that we're bringing out the worst in a lot because of that, and it's affecting, per the last couple comments, dialogue with our family, friends, and I can't explain why there's such a polarization, but I think it's very tribal and it's very personal and it's very emotional in an election year. So anyway, just want to add my 2 cents.
Thanks, Matt. I see Bill has his hand up. Go ahead, Bill.
I had to
Steve,
unmute myself. Okay. I want to make an observation. Back in the early 90s, I was working for a software company, and there was this brand new thing going on. We were all downloading free versions of Netscape web browsers, and we were exploring this new thing called the World Wide Web, trying to figure out ways to monetize it and everything. But I do remember reading an article that I thought was very prescient, and that is that it was a revolutionary development in frankly human history. Until then, in order to push information out into the world, you had to invest a lot of capital. You had to build a printing facility. You had to have news writers and newsrooms in a big building, or you had to stand up a TV station or a radio station or something. Now all of a sudden, the ability to publish information, the barriers to entry were near zero. all you had to do was put something out there, and if you could promote it, you would get a bunch of viewers or readers or whatever. And what that meant was that that trusted source of information, the NBC, ABC, or the New York Times or the LA Times, was all of a sudden in competition with a huge amount of information being pushed out by other people. And from my perspective, what I've seen is that information is now marketed to vertical market segments. In other words, and frankly, and I don't want to insult anybody here, but Fox News really figured it out fast. They realized that there was a market for conservative viewers, and if they pushed out a conservative biased product, that they would get a whole bunch of viewers, and they could sell a whole bunch of advertising. And then we saw other publications or sources all on that chart, decide to try to carve out their own market niche. And so now you have on one side, and I'll take an example, InfoWars, which I think was out on one of the tails of that bell curve. Well, they still have a market for viewers of people who believe in the stuff that InfoWars publishes. And so how do you figure it out if you're a millennial or if you're a kid who's grown up in this age? Well, I think the biggest skill that anyone has to have these days is critical thinking. You have to be able to cut through the bias and the content, be able to spot what's real, what's fake, whether or not people are presenting both sides of an argument. And maybe you can find that trusted news source. Norb Garrett, you mentioned Reuters. I finally found Reuters. I'm a latecomer to Reuters, but I agree. They're at least somewhere near center and near unbiased. And they're kind of like the old-fashioned journalism that we grew up with and we enjoyed. So that's my 2 cents. And I think we ought to remember that we're only 25 years into a technology that has completely overturned the creation of content and the ability to communicate with the world.
Thanks, Bill. We actually explore that space quite a bit in when we have more time for programming like this, but also in some of our other programmings. We've got one called Digital Detox, where we get into some of the challenges of our addictions that we've had. What I'd like to do, because actually Norb is going to be a guest speaker coming up on a particular topic, and so I'd like to start transitioning that way. And I was asked to share a nice little promo with everybody real quick, if you can see this, which is our, let's see here. Can you see the chamber? Here we go. There we go. Now I'm sharing. Sorry about that. So the bottom line is, it took our country, or a lot of people, decades to realize that they should probably eat organic in terms of what they put in their body, right? That a lot of the fast food, the processed food, was not the healthiest for us physically. And we really haven't figured out what all of the fast food for the brain is doing to us, to follow up on Bill's talk about technology. And so Facebook and Twitter and everything that's just spitting a lot of information at us quickly. And maybe it's sort of like popcorn when you go to the movies. It tastes really great and you want to keep eating it, but when you leave, you probably don't feel that well. It didn't fill you up with nutrition. So I would encourage us to think about that from the perspective of, if you believe in going to the farmer's market on Sunday and getting those fresh veggies, think about that with respect to your news consumption, and make sure you're consuming local as well, and focus on our local community here with the SC Times or Dana Point Times, if you're out there, or the Capistrano Dispatch, all three local, all owned and published by Norb Garrett and Picket Fence Media. So he'll be talking to us about the importance of local media. And if you like what you're hearing with some of this content, feel free to read FAV's blog. There's a link there. Tyler's going to share this with you. And then also the Chamber for hosting this event. You know, they really invest in the community here. And so please support the Chamber if you can and learn more. So before I bring Norb up, I just want to talk local news. This slide shows that we have an embarrassment of riches here in Orange County with respect to local news. There are counties in our country that have no local newspaper whatsoever. And so if you think about that, who's holding our government accountable if nobody's there reporting on what's going on at City Hall? I guarantee if the SC Times went away, you would not have Fox or CNN covering our city council meetings. There just would be no coverage. And that's what's happening in a lot of spaces in the country. So I'd ask you, if you're not doing it already, consider supporting our local news. And because it's the first line of confidence in freedom of the press starts local. Because if you go to the school board meeting and Sean Raimundo's there reporting, and you'll go home and read it either online or in your subscription the next day, and you'll say, yeah, Sean got it about 90% right. Well, that's pretty good because, and you know, because you were there, but you have no idea what Fox and CNN are reporting and whether or not that's really true with the big stuff out there. And so that's where a lot of that confidence erosion starts. So please, I'll let Norb take it from here, but please consider supporting our local media. Go ahead, Norb.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I know a lot of the faces on this call, and nice to see a lot of you. And I invite you, you know, at any time to reach out to me directly at Picket Fence and share with me how you think we're doing, you know, reporting locally. And I think, you know, just to pick up on what Steve was saying, I think, you know, what we aim to do is to strengthen the community by sharing information in an unbiased and neutral way. And I think what we all know is that there's an inherent bias in anything that you do, whether, you know, you like fishing, don't like fishing, like surfing, don't like surfers, you know, like walking on the beach trail, don't like people on the beach trail with a dog. I mean, everybody has some level of bias or opinion, and that's exactly what that First Amendment is all about. You should have a voice. You should have an opinion. You should, you know, hopefully feel strongly about the things that you believe in. And I think, you know, what we've tried to do locally is, you know, really kind of capture the essence of these communities, reflect the community in the newspaper, the website, the social channels, and, you know, and try to instill some level of information sharing that then gets people involved in the community, whether it's through politics or through sports or through shopping or through dining or whatever. And we've always contended that an active community is a strong community and an engaged community is a strong community. And I think, to Steve's point, I think that's the thing that scares me as a publisher as I sit here. You know, COVID has, you know, ruined the lives of many business owners, you know, throughout this globe. And we can blame politicians, and I often find myself doing that. But I think, you know, we're all scrambling to try to find an answer to the question that's being posed to us. And I think what we asked the community to do through the Insider program, and that we will continue to move towards, which is a more fully reader-supported you know, community media business, is to, you know, to recognize the fact that, you know, our business unfortunately used to rely, you know, 100% on local advertising revenue. And for us to pay for reporters and pay for printing and pay for the website and try to do our level best, as Steve said, to keep the keep our politicians honest and keep the community aware of what's happening around us, but also to celebrate all the great things that our politicians do for our community and helping us live our lives. I think there's a community newspapers like ours are under siege. I'm also on the board of the California News Publishers Association, which is the arm that covers all of the news media in the state of California. And something like 30 weekly newspapers have gone under since March 15th. And many others are under significant duress and peril. We're no different. I mean, we saw a degradation of 50% revenues in April and May and June. So, we run a pretty smart business. Paula had asked earlier in a text to me, who owns Picket Fence? I own it. I got some local investors to help start it 15 years ago. And like Steve said, we don't always get it exactly right, but we try to get it right, as 100% of the time we can. But I think, I think local media, whether it's mine or Don Kindred or, even the Register and the LA Times and the Union Trib, when they do touch us, it's so critical for there to be a journalistically educated media source that is vetting information and sharing information. I think, as Bill noted about the web and social, I talk about this all the time when I speak at colleges. The disaggregation of media sharing and the advancement of citizen journalism should be a good thing. The fact that we have more ways to hear about what other people are thinking should be a good thing. But what it seems to be doing is leading to an even more divisive universe where people seem to be less interested in hearing other people's opinions if they differ from their own. And I hope that all of us on this call and everybody that likes to think of themselves as educated consumer takes the time to appreciate all sides of an issue and then determine where you want to fall on it. And I think that's kind of what we strive to do. And again, we're not perfect, but as a local independent media operator, we're doing our level best to make our communities better. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And it is harder than ever to be neutral. It's a lot easier. Trust me, if I fell one side or the other, I'd have a lot more friends and a lot fewer enemies, because I would just be talking to my friends instead of both sides of the issue. But that's the commitment that we have to our communities. We'll continue to try to do that. And for those of you that have already stepped up and supported us, I really appreciate it. And we're going to continue to do everything we can to make our product even better, because it's not perfect. But I appreciate Steve giving me an opportunity as the owner of the local community media to talk about this. I do talk about it a lot, that at a macro level, I feel like the way that the national political discussion has evolved, I do feel like that's trickled down into our communities, into little communities like ours in San Clemente. And it is, proving to be divisive. And it is something that, we all need to watch for. We all need to help calibrate. But at the end of the day, people are entitled to their opinions. I just hope everybody would take the time to listen to what somebody else has to say as well before finalizing their decision on where they land. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, Steve, but I think more than anything, I just wanted to contribute, kind of at what it means at a community level, this conversation of bias.
I have a question, if I may.
Go ahead.
This is actually
8 minutes left.
Okay, this will be quick, but I have a question to both Norb and Bill. Bill, you referred to 1990, the internet. There's a new publishing platform that was developed called the World Wide Web. And Norb, you made reference to how you thought that social media has led to divisiveness, which I absolutely believe. There is something that goes back to 1990. I'm sure you know about it, but it's called Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. And I really would like you to talk, I think that that needs to be repealed, absolutely, and the publishing platforms ought to be held responsible for the content. And Norb, I hear you saying that everyone should express their opinion, but if their opinions are outright lies, I think the publishing platform, like the newspapers, should be held responsible. And I'd like to hear what Bill and Norb have to say about that.
Well, I'll just say, Jim, good to see you again. We are 100% responsible for the written word that goes in my newspapers and on my websites.
I'm talking about Facebook and the social media.
Yeah, I think that there is currently Trump has put forward a challenge to that legislation to try to hold some of the social media channels more accountable to the conversations that are taking place on those channels. I do personally, just my 2 cents, I feel like Zuckerberg is trying to have his cake and eat it too. I think if you're going to own that platform, you need to be responsible for it. I don't think it's appropriate for him to stand back and say, I'm just giving you, here's the road that you can drive on. I'm not responsible for the two cars that just collided head on. It's like, no, actually you built the road, so you are responsible for the two cars that just crashed head on. So I'm with you, Jim. I do think that there needs to be a level of ownership by the owners of those platforms, but that's my 2 cents, and I'm happy to hand that off to anybody else on this forum.
Yeah, I think that particular topic could be a whole nother session unto itself. I suspect there's going to be a lot of litigation coming down both ways on that as Congress has started to take up the issue and look back into it. There are tech individuals on both sides of that fence as well with respect to owning the content that's on there. So it's that would be something we might need to come back to. I would offer, Jim, that I'd be happy to have our blog writer really do a deep dive research into it and at least present both sides of the argument. First Amendment voice, we don't come down on any given side. We won't advocate one way or the other. What we do advocate is for the First Amendment, and we advocate toward educating ourselves to be as informed consumers as possible. One other thing I'd just like to thank Norb, something else that the SE Times does, you might do it in the other communities as well, is they hold a beachside chat on Fridays. And so if you have questions of your local media organization, feel free to join in those discussions via Zoom, 800 8 a.m. Friday morning, right?
Right, good military math right there. Yes.
Sorry,
yeah, and anybody that would like to join, it's an open forum. All you have to do is email me or Sean, and we'll send you the Zoom invite. But yeah, it's a robust conversation about all the topics germane to San Clemente every Friday morning at 8.
So thanks. And the last thing, because we are running up on time, I know Norb has to go. I'm happy to stay around for anybody that wants to continue the conversation. And I know we've got some of our co-hosts will probably join us in that. But I will share with you the second slide, which was behind the media bias slide that we sent out. And that's sort of, a lot of people ask at the end of our programming, what can we do? How can we get more involved? How can I be a more active citizen? And I would just offer, this is a menu that you could choose from, should you decide. There's plenty that I'm sure people are already doing. I know several people on this call are running for City Hall. I know others have organized protests. Others are journalists and engaged in the media space to begin with. So a lot of times what happens is we're preaching to the choir at FAV. We tend to be encouraging people to be more civically engaged with an audience that is civically engaged. But I'd ask you, please consider some of these ideas and feel free to give us feedback as well. We'd love to hear any of that. And you've got this slide in the chat function. We'll also email it out. So I won't leave it up there much longer. What I will do is our final poll is basically a very short end of program survey, and I'm going to go ahead and launch it. It's 3 questions. Did you find this program helpful? Where do you get your main sources of news? And do you subscribe to local news? And that's launching right now. So feel free, thank you for staying with us. Go ahead and answer those questions. And we appreciate your participation. Susie, would you like to give any parting comments from the chamber?
Well, I just want to give everyone another gold star because everyone had just amazing comments. Everyone was so polite. It was just wonderful. It was more than I could have ever hoped for or expected. I hope that the San Clemente Chamber of Commerce can continue to bring excellent programs like this to our members and to our community. So please reach out to myself, Arlen, or anyone involved here, and we are happy to support these continued efforts. So thank you.
Well, Susie, I want to thank you and Arlen and the Chamber for inviting us on. It's really, a blessing to be here in San Clemente, and given that, even though we do this programming all over the country, given that I live here in San Clemente, I feel called to be able to try to provide as much as possible as we can here locally.
Thanks, Susie.
You're welcome. Thanks to all. Be safe, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Susie.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, Bill. Take care.
Thanks, Susie.
You're welcome.
And if anybody has questions they want to ask, feel free. We're happy to stick around and chat.
Thanks. I'm going to hang around and see if any questions come up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Aaron.
Hey, Steve. Jeff Hawley. Very good program. I had a question. Like, back in 1934, the FCC, the airwaves are owned by the public. And, remember back like in the 60s, before your time probably, but, TV stations had to put out a certain amount of public broadcasting, whether it was in the form of a public, service announcement or something,
yep,
or hosting a forum to discuss issues. It seems like that's really kind of gone by the wayside. Is that true, or?
Yeah, they had to give balanced coverage.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I think it was specific to radio as well. I'm not an expert in the space by any means, but yeah, it does not seem to be balanced when you turn on a television. And I can tell you it's not. The trends that we're seeing when we engage with audiences is a lot of people are shutting off the television. They're just tuning out because they can either look at divergent opinions, between MSNBC and Fox, or hear people screaming at each other on CNN. Right. But it's just, it's not capturing your interest anymore. And so they turn their attention elsewhere. And that might be, baseball season just started, so I'm just going to watch baseball instead of the news or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know how to get around that. I've heard a lot of people bring that up, and whether it's really being considered. The challenge with where technology has led us now is we are able to curate our own content. And so and that content continues to confirm our own preconceived biases. And a lot of times, if it's negative content, we know that's not necessarily healthy for us, and it's definitely not healthy for the public discourse, but it's not necessarily healthy for us personally either, even though we hear somebody calling out that politician or somebody else that we don't like, that triggers the same dopamine and cortisol in our response system as drug addiction. And it's feeding these cycles of addiction in our public discourse right now. And a lot of people are really wrestling with this, but the solutions are difficult. As Norb brought up, it's really hard to stay independent. It's really hard to stay nonpartisan because people are pulling at you from both directions. I spent 40 months in combat in Iraq, and I feel like I'm back in a counterinsurgency. Wow. And you had extremists on both sides, and they were trying to pull the people off the fence. They wanted them to join their team, and it's very much that sort of dynamic that's going on. Luckily, for the most part, it's nonviolent, but not always. And so it's just a really challenging space right now, and I don't have any good answers. I just know I think engaging as many people as possible is productive.
Could I say a couple more things? Go ahead.
Sorry. First and foremost, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
It was an honor to serve. So I'm just trying to keep serving.
No. It's in any way you can. One question that I had that I wanted to bring up earlier that I didn't, and I should have in the pre-questionnaire, is how deep and how wide do you think is the silent majority? In other words, that silent majority that's either leaving left, right, or center, that is not polling well, meaning not polling at all, left, right, or center. And where do you think the center of gravity is with that silent majority, given where we are in the election cycle? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just trying to figure out, because it's not represented through the media, just your thoughts on that.
Well, I would point out that the fastest growing voter bloc are the independents, right? And I think they eclipsed both parties in Orange County now. If you just stay local, I'm not sure what the trends are across the country, but a lot of people are being alienated by just the partisanship going both ways from the political parties. And that's, I think those trends ebb and flow over time. I mean, at the founding of our country, the founding fathers were very much concerned about political parties and how they could upset the balance of the way the government was structured. So there are a lot of, I think, studies going on and movements out there in the civic space where people are trying to propose ideas that would help us sort of get back on the rails. If you believe that we've fallen off the rails, like, for example, ranked choice voting and figuring out how to get rid of gerrymandering of districts to better enfranchise all voters. So there are ideas out there that are being pursued, and I think it'll just depend whether the political parties see that in their interest to get behind and support. And I suspect, maybe some of those players will, maybe others won't. It's just, but it's a hard question, that's for sure.
No, I appreciate the answer.
But thanks for joining us, Matt.
You bet. Glad to be here.
Any other questions out there? One thing I don't know, Bud, I see you're still on, although your video is turned off. Are you still with us out there, Bud?
I don't know if Bud's still on.
Oh, okay.
Jeff, I think you may have had something to say, and I didn't mean to speak over you, Jeff.
Is that a Packer shirt you have on?
Oh, wait, does the video go that low? It is. I'm sorry. I'm from Wisconsin. Sorry.
I was going to comment too. Go
I went to the Rose Bowl.
So I've got a Green Bay Packers shirt there. So I went to Madison, Wisconsin.
Can you see this?
I can, absolutely.
Did you go to the game?
I went to all 5 of them.
Okay.
All 5 of the Rose Bowls. You won one.
Yeah, I'm from Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. So.
Oh, that's
nice
awesome.
to meet you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I went to
Yeah, I
Mass.
love the
Sorry,
podcast.
Steve, didn't mean to hijack your meeting.
Anyway, yeah.
No, that's okay.
No, you're a good man.
Did you have a question? It looks like you're raising your hand.
Steve, it's Marcy. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to thank you. It was very well run. It was very informative. And I think if we have different groups together, sometimes we'll see more of our commonality than our breach of, I don't know how to word it properly, but I think we have more in common than we think we do. And if you get all different age levels, groups, ethnicities, we have more in common than we think we do. And things like this are just super. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We actually, I believe that too, Marcy. It's our country was founded on this idea of e pluribus unum, which is out of many one, right? We are one country, even though we're so diverse. And yeah, we've got founding documents that are aspirational and recognize I think the folks who put that together recognize that we're human beings at the end of the day, and we're going to have our shortcomings. But if we keep striving, right, toward those principles, then I think we're doing all we can do. So you being
Well,
here,
we have to have dialogues and not
Absolutely.
shout at each other.
one of our programs is called Difficult Conversations, and the facilitator is a recovering Silicon Valley executive, I would describe him as, and he is just really gifted at bringing people together. And what we try to do, what First Amendment Voice tries, is we try to get that diverse audience that you were talking about. We try to get people of many faiths or no faith at all. We try to get generational diversity, ethnicity, gender balance in there. So we've got very different people speaking with each other who might not normally interact. And we found that to be very helpful. So thanks for being here and joining us.
Steve, I really tried to get the diversity on the call today.
So, and Chris, I saw you clapping. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I think Marcy's comments were just right on point. And I'm so glad she said them, because I do think we have more in common than we're led to believe based on the sensationalism of the media, right? And you know, I think that it's worthwhile to proactively go out there and search for other news sources that you may not normally look for, to try to get that overall perspective and understand where other people are coming from. You know, the goal is not to change your mind, it's just to open your mind. So and it's forums like this, I think, that move the ball down the field on that. So thanks for doing it, and thanks for Susie in the chamber for helping you put it together, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I'd say even beyond seeking out sources of news, maybe find somebody who you know you disagree with and take them to lunch and have conversations with them. You know, it's
There you go.
I find
Even
it always
harder.
sharpen my arguments, right?
Hi, this is Paula. I will say that the sensationalism you're talking about, it is really, really, really easy to push people's buttons. And it takes a second to get people mad, and it takes a second to make people hate. It takes a lot of time to help people love. And we all have to think about what our buttons are and know that someone is doing that, because they all are on both sides.
Yeah.
And we have to step back and become more human and have those conversations with people that we don't agree with. Because that's what's going to get us all to what I have seen today. This is very, very, very supportive to me. I'm really glad that you did this. I'm surprised, actually. I'm surprised
Well, thanks,
that
Paula.
so many people that feel the way I do about opening up and talking to each other. So thank you very much.
But to your point, you know, one of the people I like to cite is Arthur Brooks, he was formerly president of American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., and just went back to Harvard to teach. But he wrote a book called Love Your Enemies. And in it, he talks about the rhetorical dope peddlers. meaning those, media personalities, politicians who are profiting from the division, right? They're profiting from getting us emotional and wound up. And so it's in their interest to continue to do so. And he gives some ideas in terms of how you can wean yourself off of that. And some of it is from technological addiction, but they're definitely feeding the heuristics in our mind, right, that respond very rapidly to the point you were making. So thanks for being here.
Thanks to Susie.
Yeah, I can echo that. Thank you, Susie and Steve, for putting this on. This has been a great event, and just happy to be a part of it. It's just encouraging to see so many different faces on this call with so many different diverse views, and we live in a town with a lot of passionate people, and that's a good thing, I think. And to provide a platform like this for us all to get together and have a conversation like this, it's really valuable for everyone concerned, and really appreciate you for doing it.
Well, thanks for being here, and thanks for volunteering to be our administrator and monitor the chat function. So if you need more volunteer positions, I'm happy to fill them. We got plenty of content coming up in the future.
You got it. Anytime.
Thanks. Awesome. Any more questions out there from anybody?
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, Aaron. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, everybody, thank you. And thanks to the Chamber for being here with us. I really appreciate their sponsorship. And we'll have more of this in the future. It might not be through the Chamber, but definitely First Amendment Voice will be here in Southern California. And we'll make sure you hear about it. So thanks a lot. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.